My stepmother hid Dad's original will naming me as heir, so I had her arrested for fraud. I was 24 when my father died suddenly from a heart attack. Dad had been everything to me, a single father who raised me after Mom left when I was 8. He built his construction company from nothing, working 16-hour days so I could have everything he never did. Every night he'd come home covered in sawdust and cement, but he'd still help me with homework at the kitchen table. 3 days after the funeral, his wife Patricia called me to her lawyer's office. They'd only been married 2 years, but she acted like the grieving widow. Patricia was 34, only 10 years older than me, and had met Dad at some charity function. I never trusted her perfectly manicured smile or the way she'd watch me when she thought I wasn't looking. "I'm sorry, Vincent," the lawyer said, sliding papers across the mahogany table. "But your father's will leaves everything to Patricia. The house, the business, all assets." My world shattered. "That's impossible," I stammered. "Dad always said the company would be mine. He's been training me to take over since I was 16. We had plans, blueprints for expansion." Patricia dabbed her eyes with a tissue that looked suspiciously dry. "He changed his mind after we married, said he wanted me to be secure. You're young. You'll find your own way." Something felt wrong. Dad had shown me his will just 6 months earlier when updating his life insurance. I was listed as primary beneficiary for everything. He'd even joked about me being a rich man someday, said I'd earned every penny by putting up with his terrible dad jokes. I spent that night going through Dad's papers in my apartment, documents I'd helped him organize during his illness. That's when I found it, a copy of his original will, dated just 8 months before his death. I was indeed the primary heir, inheriting 85% of everything. Patricia got only a small trust fund for security purposes, as Dad had written. The will Patricia presented was dated 3 weeks later, but something was off about Dad's signature. The tremor in his hand from his medication made his writing distinctive, shaky but deliberate. This signature was too smooth, too perfect, too confident. I took both documents to a forensic expert downtown. The results were damning. The second will was forged. Patricia had somehow obtained Dad's letterhead and fabricated everything, probably while he was too sick to notice. Armed with evidence, I went to the police. Detective Reynolds reviewed everything carefully, his experienced eyes catching details I'd missed. "This is substantial fraud," he said. "We're talking about $2.3 million in assets." The warrant was issued that afternoon. I'll never forget Patricia's face when they knocked on the door of what should have been my father's house. The shock, then rage, then desperate attempts to explain it away. "Vincent's lying," she screamed as they cuffed her. "He's just a bitter child who can't accept his father loved me more." But the evidence was overwhelming. The forensic analysis, the timeline, the witnesses who confirmed Dad's original intentions. During the investigation, they discovered even more. Patricia had been married twice before. Both husbands had died under suspicious circumstances. Both had last-minute will changes favoring her. As they put her in the police car, she looked directly at me through the window. Her mask had completely fallen away. The woman I'd known for 2 years was gone, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You have no idea what you've started," she mouthed. That's when I realized this was bigger than just stealing my inheritance. Patricia was a predator, and my father wasn't her first victim. I couldn't fit what happens next in this short video. Watch the rest down below. The investigation expanded rapidly. Detective Reynolds called me 2 days after Patricia's arrest. "We need to talk," he said. "Can you come to the station?" In his office, he spread out a file thick with documents. "Your stepmother's real name is Patricia Kellerman," he said, "but she's also been Angela Foster and Monica Chen. 3 different identities, 3 dead husbands, 3 inheritance frauds." My blood ran cold. Her first husband, David Foster, died in 2018, apparent suicide by pill overdose, left everything to his wife of 8 months. The family contested, but Patricia had a valid will. He flipped to another page. Husband number 2, Robert Chen, died in a climbing accident in 2020. Again, last minute will change. The family suspected foul play but couldn't prove anything. "So she married my dad for his money," I said. "More than that, we think she murdered him." The room spun. "Your father's autopsy showed elevated levels of digitalis in his system. It's a heart medication that can trigger fatal arrhythmias in large doses." Patricia had access to his medicine cabinet. "But he had heart problems already," I protested. "That was the perfect cover. No one questions a heart attack in a man with existing cardiac issues. But the levels we found were 10 times therapeutic dose." I felt sick. The woman who'd sat across from me at Sunday dinners had poisoned my father. "We're exhuming her previous husbands," Reynolds continued, "and we need your help building the case." Over the next weeks, I became obsessed with uncovering Patricia's crimes. I learned she was methodical in her hunting. She targeted wealthy older men, recent widowers who were vulnerable and isolated. She'd insert herself into their lives through charity events, church functions, or mutual friends. Patricia studied her marks carefully. She knew Dad's business better than most of his employees within months of dating him. She understood exactly what she was inheriting. The trial preparation revealed her sophisticated planning. Patricia had practiced Dad's signature for months using documents she'd stolen from his office. She'd researched the legal requirements for will modification in our state. She'd even consulted with lawyers about inheritance law, claiming she was writing a novel. But her biggest mistake was underestimating me. Patricia had assumed I'd accept the fake will quietly, maybe contested in civil court for years while she liquidated assets and disappeared. She hadn't counted on me keeping Dad's papers or having them analyzed immediately. 3 months later, the other autopsies confirmed what we suspected. David Foster and Robert Chen had both been poisoned with digitalis. Patricia had perfected her method over years. The media dubbed her the Widowmaker. Suddenly, I was fielding calls from reporters wanting to know about life with a serial killer. "Did you suspect anything?" they'd ask. I thought about Patricia making Dad his coffee every morning, how she'd insisted on managing his medications, the way she'd encouraged him to exercise harder despite his cardiologist's warnings. She was very caring, I'd tell them. That was the scariest part. During the trial, Patricia's defense team tried to paint me as a greedy son who'd fabricated evidence, but the forensics were irrefutable. The signature analysis, the toxicology reports, the pattern of behavior across 3 marriages. The prosecutor painted a picture of a woman who viewed marriage as a business transaction. Someone who studied her victims like a predator, learning their weaknesses and exploiting their loneliness. Patricia took the stand in her own defense. Even in an orange jumpsuit, she maintained her innocent act. She claimed to have genuinely loved all 3 husbands, said the poisoning must have been accidental medication errors. "Vincent was jealous of our relationship," she said, pointing at me. "His father found happiness with me, and he couldn't stand it." But when the prosecutor pressed her about the forged will, her composure cracked. "I deserve that money," she snapped. "I made his last years happy. That ungrateful boy never appreciated what his father built." There it was, the mask slipping again. The jury deliberated for only 4 hours. Guilty on all charges, 3 counts of murder, fraud, forgery, and identity theft. When the verdicts were read, Patricia stared directly at me. No tears, no emotion, just cold calculation, like she was still planning her next move. The judge sentenced her to life without parole. As they led her away, she turned back one final time. "This isn't over," she said quietly, but loud enough for me to hear. I thought it was empty bravado. I was wrong. 2 weeks after sentencing, I was working late at Dad's construction company, my company now, when someone knocked on the office door. Through the frosted glass, I saw a woman's silhouette. I opened the door to find a woman in her 40s, impeccably dressed with Patricia's same calculating eyes. "Hello, Vincent," she said. "I'm Patricia's sister, Diana. We need to talk." My hand stayed on the door handle. "There's nothing to discuss," I said. "Oh, but there is. You see, Patricia wasn't working alone." My blood turned to ice. Diana stepped closer. "Did you really think one woman could pull off 3 perfect murders without help?" Patricia was talented, but she had a very particular skill set. I provided the business expertise. "Get out," I said, reaching for my phone. "I wouldn't call anyone just yet," Diana said calmly. "You see, I know things about your father's death that never came out in trial, things that would be very interesting to certain people. The case is closed. Patricia was convicted." Diana smiled, the same predatory expression I'd seen on Patricia. Patricia was the executioner, but I was the planner. And unlike my emotional sister, I don't get caught. She handed me a business card. "Diana Walsh, financial consultant. I've been watching you rebuild the company. Very impressive. Your father would be proud. It would be a shame if something happened to derail all that progress. Are you threatening me? I'm offering you a choice. You can continue running Dad's company, making your little life, or you can dig deeper into what really happened and lose everything." She turned to leave, then paused. "Patricia told me you were stubborn. I hope you're also smart." After she left, I sat in Dad's chair, my chair, trying to process what had just happened. I thought I'd gotten justice for my father, but apparently I'd only scratched the surface. I called Detective Reynolds. "Diana Walsh," he said, typing. "No criminal record. Runs a financial consulting firm that specializes in estate planning. Very successful, very clean. Too clean? I'll look into it. But Vincent, be careful. If she's as smart as she claims, she won't leave evidence lying around like Patricia did." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Dad's final months, looking for signs I'd missed. Patricia hadn't just isolated him socially, she'd systematically removed every person who might question her influence. Dad's longtime lawyer had retired suddenly, his business partner had sold his shares unexpectedly, his best friend had moved across the country for a job opportunity that seemed too good to be true. At the time, it seemed like unfortunate timing. Now it looked like careful manipulation. I started researching Diana Walsh. On paper, she was exactly what she claimed. Successful financial consultant with wealthy clients. But when I dug deeper, I found connections to Patricia's previous victims. David Foster had restructured his investments through Diana's firm 6 months before his death. Robert Chen had consulted with her about retirement planning, and my father had met with her about expanding the construction company. Diana hadn't just been helping Patricia find victims. She'd been positioning herself to profit from their deaths. I brought my findings to Reynolds. He studied the documents carefully. "This is good work," he said, "but it's all circumstantial. We need proof of active conspiracy. What about the timing? She consulted with all 3 victims before they died. Suspicious, but not illegal. She's a financial consultant. That's what they do." I knew he was right, but I couldn't let it go. Patricia was in prison, but Diana was still out there, probably already hunting her next victim. I decided to take a risk. I called Diana's office and scheduled a consultation. If she was still running the same scam, maybe I could catch her in the act. "Mr. Wright," she said, welcoming me into her downtown office. "I'm so glad you reconsidered." The office was impressive. Marble floors, expensive artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Diana had done well for herself. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told her, "about my father's death." "Oh? I want to know the truth. All of it." Diana studied me carefully. "The truth is expensive, Vincent, and dangerous. Are you sure you're ready?" I nodded. She walked to her desk and pulled out a thick file. Your father wasn't just Patricia's victim. He was her assignment. Assignment? We don't choose targets randomly. We research, we plan, we execute. Your father was selected because his company was undervalued and his personal life was vulnerable. She opened the file. Inside were photographs of Dad, financial records, psychological profiles. Patricia spent 6 months studying his routines before they ever met. That charity function where they supposedly encountered each other? We orchestrated it. My hands clenched into fists. We knew he was lonely. We knew he was proud of his business, but worried about retirement. We knew he wanted to see you settled and successful. You killed him for money. We killed him for much more than money. Vincent, your father's company sits on land that's about to become very valuable. The city's planning a major development project. Property values in that area will triple within 5 years. That's why she'd wanted to meet. Not to threaten me, but to recruit me. You could walk away right now, she continued. Take your inheritance and live comfortably. Or you could join us and become wealthy beyond imagination. Join you? You have something we need. Legitimacy, a clean reputation, access to the business community. With your help, we could expand operations significantly. I felt sick, but I had to keep her talking. How many others have you killed? Diana laughed. Killed is such an ugly word. We provide a service. Lonely people find companionship in their final years. Their assets are redistributed to more deserving hands. Everyone wins, except the people you murder. They die happy, Vincent. That's more than most people can say. She was completely insane, but she was also confessing to multiple murders. I reached into my jacket, pretending to check my phone. Instead, I activated the recording app. Tell me about the others, I said. For the next hour, Diana detailed their operation, how they identified targets through financial databases and social media, how they trained women like Patricia to infiltrate their victims' lives, how they structured the inheritance frauds to avoid detection. She described 12 victims across 8 states over 6 years, lonely widowers and divorcees, all wealthy, all isolated from family who might ask questions. The beauty of the system, Diana explained, is that grief makes people sloppy. Families assume their loved ones made poor decisions in their final years. They rarely investigate thoroughly, but I investigated. You were an anomaly. Most children don't have access to their parents' financial records, and most don't care enough to fight. By the time I left her office, I had everything Reynolds needed. Diana had confessed to orchestrating multiple murders, described their methods in detail, and even named other conspirators. I drove straight to the police station. This is exactly what we needed, Reynolds said after listening to the recording. She'll never see this coming. They arrested Diana the next morning. Her office yielded computers full of victim profiles, forged documents, and financial records, showing how they'd laundered millions through shell companies. The investigation revealed the true scope of their operation. 19 confirmed victims across multiple states, an estimated $23 million in stolen assets, a network of trained killers posing as loving wives. Patricia had been just one operative in a much larger organization. During Diana's trial, more details emerged. She'd been running inheritance scams for over a decade, starting with simple fraud before graduating to murder. She recruited women from financially desperate situations, trained them to be perfect companions, then sent them to hunt. The victims weren't random. Diana used data mining to identify wealthy, isolated men. She knew their financial situations, their family relationships, their emotional vulnerabilities before she ever made contact. Patricia testified against Diana in exchange for a lighter sentence. The jury heard how Diana had provided false documents, coached her on Dad's preferences, and supplied the digitalis that killed him. She told me exactly how much to give him, Patricia said from the witness stand. Said it had to look natural, like his heart just gave out. Diana showed no emotion during the testimony. Even when Patricia described watching Dad die, Diana stared straight ahead with the same cold calculation I'd seen in her office. The prosecution called me as their final witness. I testified about discovering the forged will, about Diana's confession, about the systematic way they'd destroyed my father's life. Mr. Wright, the prosecutor asked, what do you want people to understand about this case? I looked directly at Diana. These weren't crimes of passion. They weren't mistakes. These were business decisions. My father wasn't a person to them. He was an asset to be liquidated. Diana finally looked at me then. For just a moment, I saw something almost human in her eyes. Then it was gone. The jury convicted her on all counts. 19 life sentences to be served consecutively. As they led her away in shackles, Diana turned back one last time. You think this is over, she said. But there are others. There are always others. She was probably right. But at least these particular monsters were caged. I kept Dad's construction company and expanded it exactly as he'd planned. Every successful project, every new hire, every milestone felt like honoring his memory. The money Diana thought she was stealing built something lasting. 6 months after Diana's sentencing, I got a call from the FBI. They'd found evidence linking the organization to similar operations in other countries. The investigation was expanding internationally. We might need you to testify again, Agent Morrison told me. This could be bigger than we thought. I agreed without hesitation. If there were more victims out there, more families destroyed by these predators, I wanted them stopped. That's when I understood what Dad had really left me. Not just money or a business, but the responsibility to protect others from the kind of evil that had taken him from me. Some inheritances can't be stolen, They have to be earned. I've been carrying that weight for 3 years now. Every time law enforcement calls with a new lead, every time another victim's family reaches out for help, I remember why I fought so hard for justice. Patricia is still in prison, probably for life. Diana is in solitary confinement after trying to orchestrate attacks on witnesses from her cell. The other conspirators are scattered across the federal prison system, but Dad's company thrives. I've hired 12 new employees, including 2 other sons whose fathers were killed by inheritance fraudsters. We build homes for families, commercial spaces for dreams, foundations that will last generations. Sometimes I stand in the office Dad built and imagine him seeing what we've accomplished, how we turned his murder into something bigger than revenge, into protection for others. That's the real inheritance he left me. Not money that could be stolen, but purpose that no one can take away. The work continued, though. 2 years after Diana's trial, Agent Morrison called again with disturbing news. "We've identified a 4th operative," she said, "someone who's been lying dormant since the arrests." My blood ran cold. I thought we'd caught them all. Her name is Rachel Montenegro. She was Diana's protege, trained specifically for long-term infiltration. We think she's been positioning herself for years, waiting for the heat to die down. I met Morrison at a secure location downtown. She spread photos across the table, surveillance shots of a beautiful woman in her early 30s. "Rachel's different from Patricia," Morrison explained. "Patricia was impulsive, emotional. Rachel is a ghost. She's been building relationships for 3 years without making a move. Where is she now? That's the problem. She's been courting Judge Harrison, the same judge who sentenced Diana. His wife died of cancer last year. He's lonely, wealthy, and she's positioned herself perfectly. Judge Harrison had been fair during Diana's trial, but I remembered his kindness toward the victims' families. The thought of him being targeted made me sick. What do you need from me? We can approach him directly without compromising the investigation, but you have credibility with inheritance fraud cases. He might listen to you. I agreed to help, but approaching a sitting judge about a potential threat required careful planning. We decided I'd request a meeting under the guise of establishing a foundation for inheritance fraud victims. Judge Harrison met me in his chambers the following week. He looked older than I remembered, grief etched in the lines around his eyes. "Mr. Wright," he said, shaking my hand, "I've followed your work since the trial. Your advocacy for other victims has been admirable." I explained my foundation plans, then carefully steered toward his personal life. "I know you've experienced recent loss," I said gently. "I hope you're finding support during this difficult time." His face softened. "It's been challenging, but I've been fortunate to meet some wonderful people. There's actually someone, well, it's early, but she's helped me remember that life continues." My heart sank. Rachel had already hooked him. "That's wonderful," I said, trying to sound supportive. "How did you meet?" "At a grief counseling group. Rachel lost her husband in a construction accident 2 years ago. She understands the pain of unexpected loss. Every detail was perfect. Rachel had crafted a background that would resonate with Harrison, make him feel connected to her tragedy. "She sounds special," I said. "She is. Remarkably intuitive about legal matters, too. Sometimes I think she understands court procedure better than some attorneys." That was her studying him, learning his professional world just like Patricia had learned Dad's business. After leaving his chambers, I called Morrison immediately. "He's already emotionally invested," I reported. "She's playing the grieving widow angle perfectly. We need more time to build a case, but Rachel might accelerate her timeline if she suspects surveillance." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Judge Harrison's vulnerable expression when he mentioned Rachel. I'd seen that same look on Dad's face when he talked about Patricia. Hope mixed with loneliness, gratitude for unexpected companionship. The next morning brought terrible news. Morrison called at dawn. "Judge Harrison had a heart attack last night. He's in intensive care." "Is he alive, but critical?" "And Vincent?" "Rachel was with him when it happened. She's playing the devoted girlfriend, making medical decisions as his emergency contact." I raced to the hospital. In the ICU waiting room, I found Rachel Montenegro for the first time in person. She was everything the photos suggested. Beautiful, composed, tearfully explaining to concerned colleagues how suddenly the attack had occurred. "He seemed fine at dinner," she was saying. "Then he just collapsed. Thank God I knew CPR." I watched her performance, remembering Patricia's similar act after Dad's death. The concerned girlfriend, the helpful partner, the woman who just happened to be there when tragedy struck. Harrison's adult children arrived that afternoon, a son from Seattle and a daughter from Boston. They'd rushed across the country to be with their father, only to find a stranger making decisions about his care. "Who are you again?" Harrison's son demanded, finding Rachel consulting with doctors. "I'm Rachel, your father's friend." He listed me as his emergency contact. The daughter looked suspicious. "Dad never mentioned you. When did this happen?" "Your father is a private person. We've been seeing each other for several months." I approached the family during a quiet moment. "I'm Vincent Wright. I testified in your father's courtroom 2 years ago." They recognized the name from news coverage. "I need to tell you something about Rachel," I continued. "She's not who she claims to be." Harrison's son looked skeptical. "That's a serious accusation." I explained about the inheritance fraud ring, about Rachel's connection to Diana and Patricia. The children listened with growing alarm. "You think she's trying to kill our father?" the daughter asked. "I think she's trying to position herself in his life. The heart attack might have been accelerated by drugs, just like what happened to my father." We convinced the family to request toxicology tests. The results confirmed our worst fears. elevated levels of beta blockers in Harrison's system, far beyond what his prescribed medication would account for. Rachel had been slowly poisoning him. Morrison arrived at the hospital with arrest warrants. They found Rachel in Harrison's room, adjusting his IV drip. "Step away from the patient," Morrison ordered. Rachel's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of the same cold calculation I'd seen in Diana and Patricia. Then she resumed her grief-stricken girlfriend act. "I don't understand. I'm just trying to help him. By giving him beta blockers that could stop his heart? I don't know what you're talking about." But the evidence was overwhelming. Surveillance footage showed Rachel entering Harrison's house with a pharmacy bag the night before his heart attack. A search of her apartment revealed detailed notes about his routine, his medical history, and his financial portfolio. Most damning was a journal entry dated 3 weeks earlier. "Target is ready. Emotional attachment established. Medical vulnerability confirmed. Timeline, 30 days. Rachel Montenegro was just another predator, trained by Diana to hunt vulnerable men. But unlike Patricia's impulsive methods, Rachel had been planning Harrison's death for months. During her trial, the full extent of Diana's network finally emerged. Rachel wasn't the only sleeper agent. There were 5 other women scattered across the country, all building long-term relationships with wealthy targets. The FBI launched Operation Inheritance, coordinating with multiple agencies to identify and arrest the remaining operatives. Each arrest revealed more victims, more families destroyed by systematic murder disguised as romance. Judge Harrison survived, though his recovery took months. When he finally left the hospital, he thanked me personally. "You saved my life," he said simply. "I just recognized the pattern. I couldn't let what happened to my father happen to you." Harrison nodded. "Evil doesn't just disappear after one conviction. It evolves, adapts, finds new ways to hunt. People like you and me, we have to stay vigilant." He was right. The inheritance fraud ring had been larger than anyone imagined, spanning decades and dozens of victims. But for the first time since Dad's death, I felt like we were winning. Rachel received 3 consecutive life sentences. The other operatives are being prosecuted across multiple jurisdictions. Diana's entire network has been dismantled, but Harrison's words stay with me. Evil does evolve. Somewhere out there, other predators are studying our success, learning from our methods, developing new ways to exploit vulnerable people. That's why I've dedicated my life to this work. The Vincent Wright Foundation now helps law enforcement agencies recognize inheritance fraud patterns. We've trained thousands of estate attorneys, medical professionals, and financial advisors to spot the warning signs. Every month, we receive calls from suspicious family members who remember Dad's story. Most turn out to be false alarms, genuine romances between consenting adults. But occasionally, we uncover another predator. Last week, we helped expose a woman in Texas who was slowly poisoning her 3rd husband while forging documents to claim his ranch. The week before, we assisted authorities in Florida who'd identified suspicious patterns in multiple elderly deaths. The work is exhausting, sometimes heartbreaking. But every predator we stop, every family we protect, honors Dad's memory and validates the choice I made that first night in his lawyer's office. I still run Dad's construction company, now expanded into multiple cities, but the foundation has become my true calling. It's the inheritance he never intended to leave me, but the one that matters most. Some legacies are built with money and property. Others are built with purpose and protection. Dad gave me both, but only one can never be stolen.